Welcome back to Tech Fails, the channel where we exhume the projects that should have stayed buried. Today, we're not looking at a small mistake. We're not looking at a minor bug. We are looking at a machine that proves that sometimes bigger is not just not better, it's a technological disaster. Forget laptop, this was a luggable. Forget convenience, this was an ordeal. We are talking about the Dell XPS M2010, massive, impractical 20-inch laptop. For those of you who weren't watching the tech scene back in 2006, you missed a golden age of excess. Dell, in their infinite wisdom and ambition, decided to create what they thought was the ultimate desktop replacement. They saw the laptop market booming, but they also saw a consumer who wasn't willing to compromise on screen size or power. Their solution? The M2010. It wasn't just a failure of engineering, it was a failure of product definition. And that, my friends, is how you create a prime example for the history books of technology scandals, a scandal of over-engineering and underthinking. The official announcement of the Dell XPS M2010 was met with a mixture of awe and outright confusion. When they presented it, it wasn't pulled out of a backpack. It was carried like a briefcase. A very heavy, very awkward briefcase. Let's start with the sheer physics of this thing. The M2010 weighed in at a staggering 18.3 pounds, and that's before you factored in the power brick. The brick itself was an extra few pounds of industrial strength transformer. For context, most modern 17-inch gaming laptops weigh under 6 pounds. The M2010 was 3 times that weight. You want to use it on your lap? Forget it. You'd need a reinforced steel table and a prescription for a back brace. The common term for computers this size back then was luggable, which sounds cute, but it's a brutal truth. You lugged it, you didn't carry it. Dell's design philosophy here seemed to be, we will put a handle on it, therefore it is portable. And they did. The exterior was wrapped in black leather or perhaps synthetic leather, because this machine was already expensive enough. It had a giant metal briefcase-style handle running across the spine. When closed, it looked like something a CEO would carry if they were trying to smuggle a small dog into a board meeting. This design acknowledged its non-portable nature. So, what did you get for your starting price of around $3,500 to $4,000? Back in 2006, you got a lot of things. Mostly, you got stuff that added to the weight. Let's look at the display, which was a giant mistake. The star of the show, the thing that drove the whole design, was the 20.1-inch LCD display with a resolution of 1680x1050. This was a breathtaking size for a portable computer at the time. Watching movies on it? Fantastic. But the size mandated a chassis that was essentially a suitcase. When you open the clamshell, the display would swing up, utilizing this incredibly complex, multi-hinged kickstand assembly. It was over-engineered to the point of absurdity. It was designed to let you adjust the screen angle for viewing across a room, because, let's be honest, you were never going to sit close to this thing for long. It was designed for the couch or the kitchen table. Now we move on to the input devices, where we find the detached headache. Here's where the luggable media center idea truly took hold. The keyboard was a full-sized desktop-style unit, but it wasn't attached. It was wireless, operating via Bluetooth. Dell's pitch was that you could sit back on your couch and type or navigate from across the room. On paper, this sounds great. In reality, it was one more thing to charge, one more thing to keep track of, and one more thing to fail. And when you closed the laptop, the detached keyboard neatly slotted inside the massive chassis, it was protected by a piece of plastic trim. It was a clever, self-storage solution that only existed because the device itself was too large to accommodate a permanently attached traditional keyboard. It was fixing a problem that Dell themselves created. This is a common pattern in technological disasters. Adding to the wireless input devices was the optional Bluetooth mouse, also stored internally. Again, great for media control, but it added to the cost, complexity, and overall bloat of the entire package. Next up is the sound system. Loud, heavy, and completely unnecessary. One of the most praised features, which of course contributed the most to the weight, was the integrated sound system. The M2010 boasted an incredible 9 internal speakers and a separate subwoofer. 9 speakers in a laptop. It sounded phenomenal. It had spatial audio before spatial audio was a buzzword. It was genuinely powerful enough to fill a medium-sized room with rich, detailed sound. But this level of audio fidelity, crammed into the machine's base, meant the machine had to be deeper, thicker, and heavier. Every ounce of audio performance was paid for in pounds of sheer mass. It was proof that Dell completely abandoned the concept of portability in favor of maximum feature density. The Dell XPS M2010 is not merely a footnote in computing history. It's a case study in technology scandals centered around executive hubris. Why did this project get the green light? The mid-2000s were a time of escalating specifications. The laptop market had split into two camps, the ultra-portables and the desktop replacements. Dell decided that desktop replacement meant must include every single desktop feature, even if it compromises the portable form factor entirely. That was the fatal decision. The internal components were powerful for the time. Intel Core 2 Duo processors, up to 4 GB of RAM, and discrete graphics from ATI, usually the Mobility Radeon X1800. These were all cutting-edge parts, but those parts generated a massive amount of heat and demanded a huge amount of power. This brings us to the ultimate irony of a portable computer, its power requirements. The Core 2 Duo and the X1800 GPU, combined with the massive 20.1-inch screen, meant the battery life was less a feature and more a cruel joke. Early reviews suggested that the maximum runtime on the standard battery was barely more than 90 minutes. Under heavy media use, it could drop significantly lower. Dell was essentially selling a portable computer that had to be plugged in at all times. The battery was not for mobility. It was a glorified, uninterruptible power supply, or UPS. You were carrying 20 pounds of computer just to move it from one wall socket to another. This disconnect between the promise of portability and the reality of tethered operation is a classic feature of failed tech products. Who was this thing for? At an entry price that could buy a decent used car $4,000 and configurable up to the $8,000 range, it was squarely aimed at the ultra-niche, high net worth individual. They were looking for a mobile media platform. The problem was, what did this machine do that a dedicated desktop and a separate, much cheaper laptop couldn't do better? For mobility, a $1,500 15-inch laptop was vastly more portable and cheaper. For media, a $1,000 desktop PC and a good set of speakers offered better performance, upgradability, and a larger monitor for less money. For style, the leather-bound briefcase looked quickly dated itself and was simply too conspicuous and heavy to be practical in any professional setting. The market simply did not exist for this machine. The Dell XPS M2010 is the perfect representation of a sunset product. It was a design so aggressive and niche that it burned brightly for a moment and then quickly faded into obsolescence. The machine was released in 2006, and by 2008, the world of computing had already begun to shift dramatically. The launch happened just before the revolutionary iPhone in 2007. The iPhone fundamentally changed the public's perception of mobile computing. Suddenly, everyone was prioritizing sleekness, lightness, and instant access over size and brute power. The M2010, which represented everything heavy and cumbersome, looked instantly archaic. This technological divergence was swift and brutal. Netbooks and thin laptops were right around the corner, pushing portability and low cost. Even higher-end gaming laptops began prioritizing slimness and power efficiency. The M2010 was a lumbering dinosaur in the face of this evolving, speedier tech ecosystem. Dell never had a direct successor to the M2010. They learned a harsh, expensive lesson. The company quickly pivoted back to more sensible 17-inch desktop replacements and high-end gaming rigs that were actually capable of being carried in a standard backpack. The M2010 was perhaps the last gasp of the philosophy that said, we can build a desktop and call it a laptop. No, you can't. You have to design for the form factor, not against it. The M2010 serves as a powerful historical technical disaster, albeit a niche one. It didn't explode, it didn't cause massive data loss, but it failed in its primary mission, to be a practical, desirable, portable computer. Its failure reveals a crucial flaw in the corporate development process, the design by committee mentality. You can almost trace the product's development through the meetings. A marketing VP demands the biggest screen on the market, then an audio engineer demands sound that blows away all competitors. Then the industrial designer insists it needs to look premium and be easy to move. It was a product built on a checklist of bests and mosts, resulting in a confusing, compromised Frankenstein of a computer. It was a victim of its own features. So, what is the ultimate takeaway from the Dell XPS M2010? It offers 3 vital lessons for anyone in tech, and especially for those watching future technology scandals unfold. First, form factor defines function. The M2010 tried to ignore the fundamental constraints of the laptop form factor, portability, heat, and battery life. You cannot simply stuff desktop components into a shell, attach a screen, and call it a breakthrough. Successful design respects its limitations, not attempts to break them. Second, niche markets are dangerous. Building a high-cost product for an extremely narrow niche is almost always a path to financial failure. The number of people who needed a 20-pound media center with a detachable keyboard and a 2-hour battery life was apparently very small. The M2010 sales were dismal. Third, simplicity is value. In a world where consumers are increasingly looking for elegance and ease of use, the M2010 stood as a monument to complexity. The detachable keyboard, the intricate hinge, the 9 speakers, it was all too much. It's a powerful reminder that often the most revolutionary products are those that subtract features, not just add them. Think of the original iPhone versus the M2010. One defined the future, the other defined a glorious but expensive dead end. The Dell XPS M2010 wasn't just a big laptop. It was a loud, heavy, and very clear warning shot about the perils of technological excess. It sits perfectly in the Museum of Tech Fails, reminding us that innovation doesn't always mean bigger, better, or more expensive. Sometimes it just means practical. What massive, misguided piece of tech do you remember from the mid-2000s? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time for another walk through the graveyard of technology scandals.